I'm Sandy Peterson, and this is my son Grant, one of the more experienced players of Cthulhu Wars. We're going to talk about the strategies in detail. I'm going to talk about the exact abilities and spellbooks each faction gets.
I'll be talking about strategies for playing each of the factions. I'm going to discuss basic strategy for the Yellow Sign faction. Some advantages for the Yellow Sign faction are that you have a giant army of tiny units that are really hard to smash through to get to your Great Old Ones. I mean, the King in Yellow is always surrounded by a bunch of undead, so it's hard to scatter him and then go and kill the King in Yellow. He can use Shriek of the Biaki to come in and protect Haster. So it's quite difficult to really take him out. And also because of Passion, whenever you get rid of a cultist, he has a point of power, he can probably just summon the cultist back. So Yellow Sign is really durable and hard to defeat. Furthermore, because of desecrations and various ways to get Elder tokens, the Yellow Sign doesn't worry so much about gates, so the traditional method of beating an enemy by taking away their gates from them doesn't work so much on him. And of course, his monsters are free, and that helps him to retain a high supply of the monsters. So basically, Yellow Sign has a giant army of tiny units and doesn't worry about the Doom Track the same way the other players do. This means the Yellow Sign is the most unusual faction, and he also happens to be the most complex faction today to play. And because of that complexity, I'm just going to cover, for strategy, just one straightforward method of play for beginners. So because of the complexity and the various strategies you can use for King in Yellow, I'm going to cover one straightforward method that I suggest for beginners. So, first thing to do is to summon the King in Yellow. You have to do this to be able to get the rest of your spellbooks. Where you do this matters a lot. You could go to Arabia or Scandinavia or the North Atlantic. My advice is to go ahead and do it in Arabia, actually. So, for your first action, move a cultist to Arabia, then spend 4 power to summon the King in Yellow there. At this point, the things you could do, and this is where strategy becomes complex because you have lots of options even in the first round. I mean, you could build a gate here right now if you wanted, or you could go on and just with the King in Yellow march around and munch up capture cultists who can't protect themselves even with their monsters. That does put the King in Yellow at some risk. But the simplest thing to do is to take the King in Yellow back to Europe then, that's 1 power, and then spend your last 2 points of power to desecrate. This means you for sure get a desecration done because you have 6 units there, you're guaranteed to succeed. This means that at the end of the first round, you have 2 spellbooks, 1 for summoning the King in Yellow, and 1 for desecrating in the Europe/Asia area. I suggest the first 2 spellbooks you get are Screaming Dead when you first awaken him, and then Zingaya. You could also get Passion at this point if you're seeing Crawling Chaos being a bit aggressive about picking off cultists, other people's cultists at this point. But get Zingaya for what I'm going to do, for what I'm going to show you what you could do. All right, so at the start of the second round, you should have 9 power. Now, we will have Black Goat. Black Goat is based here. They'd have a bunch of units hanging out right here, of course, but probably they'll have a gate here or maybe in the Indian Ocean. Let's say that it's just right here. So what you do now, by the way, when you're desecrated, you summon an undead. You now do Screaming Dead, take him over here. That costs 1. During the second round, what your goal should be is to build up as much power as possible for the third round, and you'll see why when we get to the third round. The best way to get power is not to build gates of your own, which can be pretty vulnerable as the Yellow Sign, but rather to capture other people's cultists and take their gates. So, for example, Black Goat has a gate here. Bring in your zombie and your King in Yellow with Screaming Dead, and then you can just, in fact, then, at your choice, capture the cultist and get him for a point of power later, or use Zingaya to turn him into an undead, giving you another person for when you desecrate. Next, you can just spend 2 power and march cultists over like this, or just march this cultist over here. And then you control an extra gate. And if you captured this cultist, you have an extra power for later. Then just desecrate Africa to get another spellbook. Probably Passion or maybe Shriek of the Biaki at this point. keep trying to desecrate until you succeed. If you fail, summon an undead, and once you succeed, summon a Biaki, who is good to be left behind for the combat value, and you can just use Shriek of the Biaki to have him join you later on. That's my general strategy when I do it, is when I fail, I summon an undead, and when I succeed at the desecration, then I bring in a Biaki. So then, just proceed to march around with the King in Yellow and your undead using Screaming Dead and desecrating. If you do a good job of capturing cultists and maybe taking at least one gate from another person in the second round, then at the start of the third round, you might have 14 or more power from the extra gates, from sacrificing enemy cultists, and from the desecrations that you're getting power from. The reason you want to have a bunch of power is so that, towards the start of the third round, you can get to where you have a gate, say come back here if you, for example, had done a desecration there at the end of the second round, and now summon Haster. This should leave you in the single digits, but you won't be a lot less than the other people, and remember, your actions are cheap and you actually summon monsters while you're desecrating. So then, at this point, you use by the way, definitely get Third Eye when you awaken Haster to make your desecrations both cheap or to get extra Elder Signs when you succeed at them. At this point, just march the King in Yellow with the undead around the map and desecrate the world, leaving behind units in your wake to get extra power from them. Continue to gobble up cultists with him when possible, though this will get harder as the game goes on with other people summoning more and more monsters. Now, once people have got all their Great Old Ones out, and really, Haster could very well be the last Great Old One to come out into play. Cthulhu, Nyarlathotep, Shub-Niggurath may all come out first. But again, if you did a good job in the second round building up power, Haster should come out at the start of the third round. So once you see that an enemy faction is doing really well on the Doom track, they're ahead of the other people. They probably will be ahead of you at this point since your Doom points are hidden in the form of Elder tokens, not on the Doom track. At this point, you want to use He Who Is Not to Be Named to send Haster out to take out whoever's doing best. In this case, we're assuming that Cthulhu is doing best. Rawr, fight. So, use He Who Is Not to Be Named to send Haster to a place that costs 1 power. Then, at this point, you should have 6 spellbooks also, which lets you initiate combat immediately. Then spend another point to summon as many Biaki as you have around to the battle. And then spend 1 final point of power to initiate the battle. Because of Haster's Vengeance ability, you're virtually guaranteed to kill their Great Old Ones, as long as you roll at least just 1 kill. And the Biaki protect Haster from being killed himself. So that's my advice for a beginner's style of playing the King in Yellow. Just start off with the King in Yellow, desecrate Europe, get Screaming Dead and Zingaya, go around filling up your army with undead, capturing cultists, stealing gates when possible, and then once you summon Haster, use him to take out whoever is in the lead or whoever you feel may come into the lead soon. Then just continue to do desecrations and spending power during the Doom phase to do rituals of annihilation, and you should win. Now, just as the King in Yellow is complex to play as, he is complex to stop. He doesn't care about his gates so much because he gets Elder tokens in different ways. So it's weird to try and fight him. The best way to do it is to remember that to win, he must get all of his spellbooks, just like any other faction. That means the King in Yellow must get all around the map to certain places at certain times to successfully desecrate them. If, for example, Shub-Niggurath is completely full up in Africa and is keeping the King in Yellow from going there, he'll never get the spellbook for desecrating Africa or Australia. I mean, New Zealand. So if you can keep him from doing those desecrations, you can keep Yellow Sign from winning by virtue of not having all their spellbooks. Also, if you can kill the King in Yellow, each time you kill the King in Yellow, that sets him back at least 4 points of power that he has to spend summoning him. And getting set back in power is bad news for any faction.